As we continue our look into racks now, we're going to take a look at some special controls called macros. Now if you have access to the project files and you want to follow along, let's open up Funky Jam. Now after you've opened this up, let's tab key over into session, and I'm going to solo just this funky drum pattern here. Now even though we're using an audio waveform to create a sound, I can still create a group of devices, and you can already see there's a dynamic tube and an EQ8 down here. So I'm going to select both of those and right click and group again. So now we have these in a rack together. Right up below this power on switch that turns off everything in the rack, we have another switch that looks like a squirrely kind of thing. If you click on that, it gives us 8 knobs that we can assign to anything. And let's watch how this works to see how we can get the most out of this. Now currently I've got a dynamic tube, so in here I can control the wetness and the dry, or the amount of distorted and non-distorted sound blended together. So I'm going to take this macro here, and we're going to go into map mode. The first thing you do in map mode is we're going to connect one of these parameters to one of these knobs, and it's in that order. So I'm going to take the drive first and say map that to this control. Next I'm going to choose the dry wet balance and map that to the second control. Notice that as we do these, we can see they're active by the shift in color. We can also change their names. Now we're in map mode, but we're missing some of the details because the browser is closed. Let's go ahead and open that up. You can see that when we're in map mode, I'll disengage, we have browser. I'll re-engage, we actually can see the macro mappings. This first knob called macro 1 is controlling the drive setting within the dynamic tube effect. So I'm going to come over here and click on macro 1 and type Command R for rename. And I'm just going to call it just that, drive. And press enter. Now we can see the name appear here. I'm going to go to my second macro, click on it and type Command R to rename that, and call that mix of tube. A mix of tube here, so I know what I'm doing. Let's come over now to the EQ8, and I'm going to choose a parameter here. Let's choose number 2. I'm going to click on number 2, and there's our parameter. So let's take our G, I'm going to map that down here to the bottom and call that Command R and call that G gain for 2. Then I'm going to come back over here and choose the Q, or the bandwidth, and map that. Give it Command R and Q for 2. Next to that, I'm going to map that to the frequency. So let's select frequency now and map that here, and I'll call that Command R freq of 2. Now notice again we can see all of these up here. Enter key takes that into permanent memory. I'm going to map mode now. We see the names, we can tell which ones are active, and we can adjust these settings while they're playing. Let's listen. Taking the drive. Now we can't hear that yet because we're all dry or no effect, so I'm going to increase the mix of the tube. And now we can hear the distortion cutting in. Now we can create some great sweep effects. Let's take this and sweep it up to the mids and create a very high Q. And we'll change the gain. Now that we have this little bump, we can sweep it around. So now I can simply hide this device away, and in my rack all I see are my macro controls. This gives me great access to that device and I only have access to the ones I want to alter, and I can even record these settings. So again, that's the use of macros and map mode for an audio or any sort of device rack.